I think part of providing a space where people feel heard is making sure that there is space to listen and that there are avenues for people to speak up, give input, and know that if they write to us or speak out on a certain issue, we will listen to that and give it proper consideration.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Decoding Cocktails podcast. I'm your host, Chris LeBeau. At the ripe age of 38, I left my former career behind and joined the hospitality industry. Since then, I've been on a rapid journey of learning, meeting all sorts of great people, and this podcast is my chance to bring you along with me, whether I'm interviewing somebody that works in the industry, another enthusiast, or occasionally stepping back to share what I'm working on or my thoughts. I'm so glad you're here, and so with that aside, let's get into today's episode. What's happening, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of the Decoding Cocktails podcast. My guest today is Charlotte Voisey. Before we get into what she's up to now, let's talk a little bit about where she's been. She previously served as the global head of ambassadors, that's plural, for a little company called William Grant & Sons, the folks behind brands like Hendrick's Gin, Sailor Jerry Rum, Tullamore Dew, Drambuie, and a murderer's row of Scotch whiskeys, including Glenfiddich, Monkey Shoulder, and the Balvenie. She was with them for roughly 18 years. So what do you even do after a ride like that? Well, Charlotte is now in a newly created role as the executive director of Tales of the Cocktail. She works under the CEO, helping guide the organization's mission and explores new partnerships and opportunities. With my fourth Tales coming up this July, I was especially curious to kind of hear her thoughts on what keeps the event interesting and exciting. Not that I haven't loved it, but once you've been there, done that, got the t-shirt a few times, what do you really kind of look forward to? And I'll, of course, let her answer the question. But one of the things she said that I really wasn't expecting on itself, but immediately rang true is she said, it's impossible to underscore how much the importance of the backdrop of the city of New Orleans matters and what a magical place it is. And I just couldn't have agreed. I remember her saying that. In this episode, we're going to talk about things like the drink less but better movement, the rise of cannabis, and the importance of the beyond the bar work that Tales is doing. This is where they address topics that go deeper than the drinks themselves. Charlotte was also gracious enough to explore some of the choppier waters of our current social and political climate. Historically, bars have served as this third space, a public house where people gather. So I asked her, how do we ensure that bars remain or re-become places where voices can be heard with kindness and respect, no matter where someone falls on the spectrum? Can we still listen and speak to one another with care, even when we disagree? You can find Tales of the Cocktail online at Tales, that's T-A-L-E-S, talesofthecocktail.org, and on Instagram. There are links to both of those in the show notes. You can also find Charlotte on the old IG at Charlotte, H-D-O Voisey, V-O-I-S-E-Y. And if you've never been to Tales, I still remember my first one. It was a great time. I'm looking forward to going back. That's all I have for now, and enjoy this conversation with Charlotte. So Charlotte, I'm getting ready to, so it's funny. Here we are sitting at the end of February, and I've kind of been thinking a little bit about Tales. Was chatting with it recently about one of my good friends in New York, and at this point in time, being what is kind of my fourth, there are those moments when I begin to think about, not that I've ever seen and done it all, but what's left to go back to, and obviously connecting with people I've met over time. But as you step into this new role, for someone like me, as who's coming back to Tales for the fourth time and has kind of been to the big parties, been to the intimate gatherings, what are the things that make you excited about the organization? What are the things you think people like me need to be thinking about as we kind of dig deeper into the environment that is Tales?
The wonderful thing about the Tales of the Cocktail is that every single year things change, right? Our industry is dynamic, it's ever evolving, and evolve is actually the theme of the conference this year, which I think is so apropos because every single year new issues, new challenges, new opportunities, new people emerge in our industry as thought leaders. And Tales of the Cocktail is that moment every year to check in and see what's new, the latest and greatest, or the new thoughts, the important information that we need to understand. It's like that check-in point on an annual basis. I've been attending Tales of the Cocktail since 2006, and I can honestly say that each and every year is different. It's special in different ways. I've met different people. I experience new information at different seminars. Every year, the schedule might look similar in its enormity and its depth, but every single seminar that's handpicked is completely different year on year on year. So there is actually a lot that changes, and it's a way to keep up with industry thought leaders.
First of all, I think a joking theme one year should be enormity, because I think when you look at the scale on the schedule, you're just like, how can this many things be going on? And of course, there's the whole series of events that aren't even on the schedule. So it is so, it's like I have to clear out an afternoon to go through the schedule. But it is cool because obviously the array of things is just so broad in that regard. And I would echo back that I agree that having worked in a whole other industry before this time, there are times that the conferences or the professional check-ins are the things that bring you back to things you might forget over the course of a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And while there is so much on the schedule, it's probably one of the most common questions even that I get asked is, how does one navigate Tails? And the question often comes from a new person, right, that coming to Tails for the very first time. It can be overwhelming to look at the schedule. So one of the things that we're doing this year is to break down sort of some pathways. For example, if you're a first-time attendee, this is how it works. These are the things we might recommend for you to do each day to sort of navigate your way through the Tales of the Cocktail schedule, certain seminars that might make sense to a first timer, things like the networking nook where you might be able to book an appointment, speak to a mentor, these kinds of things. Those that have been to Tales multiple times, like yourself and many industry figures, kind of understand the flow. That said, with a different schedule every year, it's still important to take that day and really kind of map out your own schedule. And I think people that do that get the most out of Tales of the Cocktail each year.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah, and I find there's the fun mix of like the big and large events because while I've certainly built my little network over the years, I come down I don't come down as part of a team. And so I think there's always the moments when, I think you can show up as part of your bar or brand team. In a way, maybe by the end of it, you're a little bit like, get away from me. You also have the people you are almost like obligated to socialize with. And sometimes as
Yep.
like, the people coming down as like solo people are like, how do I actually, because like you're at a big party and sometimes like, is this even the best place to meet people? So I think that's one of the other things that's overwhelming about Tales. And again, you walk up to people, they're always nice. But I think sometimes that's it too, is like finding ways to connect in the middle of that scrum and madness can almost be tricky at times too. And I imagine for someone like you, having done this for a minute, knowing so many people, Tails is almost, I imagine, a tough place to have a reunion for somebody like you too, because you have so many things, I imagine that creep up onto a schedule at times too.
Yeah, that's absolutely true and has been the case over the last few years. I usually give the advice that if you do want to attend a seminar, make sure you get to an event, meet someone for lunch, that you should plan those, book them ahead of time. For me, in the last few years, I will say, however, that I've kind of taken the hands off the wheel because what I find is you can make those plans, but things come up as they do in any week of our professional lives, especially in New Orleans, where there are so many fantastic, worthwhile distractions, be that great breakfast, fun music that you might happen upon across the street. But also, one of the wonderful things about Tales is that you just know you'll bump into people. And often you might sort of pursue that elusive quick drink or coffee with someone. You're actually more likely to see them if you bump into them amongst these seminar lines at the Ritz, for example, or any number of our offsite events, as you've already mentioned.
Mhm.
That's one of the fun parts of Tales, right? Knowing that you'll see those people that you wish to connect with.
Sure. After your your career at William Grant and Sons, one, sometimes there can be a time when, hey, you've done the growing and there's times to moving on. But what was it, I imagine, as someone who probably at least has a pretty good view of the drinks landscape.
Yeah.
What was it about this job that kind of drew you in? It's obviously, again, Tails is magical in its own way, but what was it again that spoke to you as someone who would likely at least have a decent resume for any job in the drinks biz? What was it that made this thing stand out to you?
Well, thank you for that. I think I was most attracted by the opportunity to make a meaningful impact on the industry that I had gained so much from personally. Tales of the Cocktail is a mission-driven non-for-profit foundation, and we exist to support, educate, advance, support the communities of the industry around the world. And that for me to be able to take all my skills and experience, but also knowledge, contacts, and passion for the industry and channel that into something really quite meaningful on a personal level meant a lot to me. It was also a way to stay in the industry that I love, but also take an opportunity that would allow me to grow new skills and develop other sides of this business for my own learning. So it seemed to be a really lovely sort of mutually beneficial exchange of opportunity. And that's what drew me. That and the fact that Tails has been close to my heart since my first event almost 20 years ago now.
So speaking of your first event and being drawn in, and we may have even already touched on it, but in terms of, obviously Entails has its board, and you guys have your CEO that are kind of painting the vision, but are
Mm.
there in terms of having that impact, are there the areas that you're at this point, again, we're still relatively new into that, but the things you're particularly excited about are places you're hoping to put your effort in particular right now? I mean, I don't know if I'm asking too big of a question, but I guess I'm curious how you're excited to hopefully be spending your time outside of that particular week uh, in July.
Yeah, and there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into pulling off that week, right? And also let's not forget that Tales of the Cocktail is a year-round platform. We have many different programs and
Mhm.
partnerships that we activate year round. And a lot of that work does, of course, go into the week in July. For me, I'm becoming more and more excited because having known Tales fairly well for a while, when you actually get to peek behind the curtain almost backstage, you appreciate, and I've gained an appreciation and understanding of all of the intricacies, all of the details that go into making Tales work, the seminar process alone. We've had, I think, almost 400 submissions for this year, about 60 make it through. But the majority of those 400 are wonderful and varied and very much worthy of being on that stage. So just the process of understanding what topics are important to people and trying to make that selection so that what we offer from an educational perspective is as broad as possible, that gives access to as many communities as possible, i.e., that they feel these seminars are for them. That's become really eye-opening for me. So I'm quite excited to see that actually come to fruition, having now been a part of the behind the scenes process of that.
Yeah. I was with a guy here in St. Louis who owns a couple of different bar and restaurant establishments today, and he has certainly at this point made the industry his career, but he certainly talks about, again, I mean, the industry at times can chew up people, spit them out, and but over time we're doing a better job at finding a way to make this a career. Like, are there when we think about this as, we've certainly seen the arc. I always think about growing up. I feel like, as a someone who's 42, it's like if I told my parents back then I wanted to be a chef when I was 18, whether or not they would have supported or not, and they're very lovely parents, I think like that garners a slightly different answer now. Like a chef is seen as a more dignified job now than it was 30 years ago.
Mm.
I feel like hopefully over time, the roles in mixology and hospitality are being seen as that. But, what are your thoughts over the past however many years of getting this to be a profession that's not only seen as dignified, but like sustainable? We obviously have brand work now, but how do you feel about people that are coming in terms of how, how do you put in a good 30 years in this industry and not get totally broken at the same time too?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's an important topic that we're having more and more conversations about. Almost a third of our education programming every year at Tales of the Cocktail is in our Beyond the Bar initiative, which is set up to talk about exactly that. It's everything from wellness to community building, inclusivity. It's talking about everything but your time spent making drinks, being behind the bar, that goes into your ability to not only survive in the hospitality industry, because I think that was the conversation for a few years. I want to move us on to talking about how to thrive in this business. You know, we shouldn't just sort of get through it. We should enjoy it. We should be creative. We should enjoy our life outside of work as well, as many other industries are able to. So I think ever more so each year, this industry is better about talking about those things. It helps having key role models who have maybe been through some difficult periods in their career and come out the other side and talk about it openly. I think now we're also mixing with a new generation, right? If we look at our demographics for the people that registered for Tales of the Cocktail last year, we see age demographics, we see 50% of our attendees were coming to Tales for the very first time. So, which is a lovely statistic because it means more and more people are curious and making that trip, taking time out to come to a conference where they know they can get good education, good networking opportunities. So again, I think it's this idea that the industry is constantly evolving, and this area of well-being and how to stay in the business for a long time is at the top of many people's minds. I think we're doing a good job with that.
It is pretty cool in that, and again, like I was saying, there could be a year in my trajectory where it's like, oh, hey, I can't make it this year, or, I'm taking this year off or something like that. But the
Sure.
idea that the industry does replenish at that level of new blood coming
Mm.
in, but again, also bringing in whole hosts of new ideas or perspectives we haven't, and hopefully some of us veterans, other veterans can also point people in the right direction too, in terms of like, come in all wide-eyed and idealistic and be like, okay, this is great, but let's also talk a little bit about some of the rules of the road too at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's that constant exchange, right, of experiences and fresh ideas. I think you sort of assume that the old guard or the veterans are the ones to sort of teach or give experience to the new generation coming in, but sometimes it's also the other way around, right? We learn
Hmm.
from the new generation, like what's important to them, what are they drinking, what are they thinking about the industry, what do they need or want, and how can they contribute. You need to have that consistent kind of rolling through of perspectives in order for the industry to keep thriving and being its best.
Yeah. You know, one of the other things that's interesting in terms of what are people drinking, or another thing I seeded for us to talk about too, is the idea that, right now, I think it's probably fair to say that like cannabis is seen as like the something like the hip, cool, safer thing to consume. And like, I'm not here to claim alcohol as a health drink or whatnot, but I think one of the things is just curious right now is how we as the industry think about that in terms of with the rise of this, which is just fine. Again, I think we all, none of us think that alcohol hasn't caused problems in families and professional life. And I think right now there's a little bit of a reckoning for that at times. Is what we're seeing a little bit of people kind of stepping away, which is good if it's not for you. But I guess I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the arc of the industry right now as we hear at least all these reports that like the young kids aren't interested anymore and whatnot. I think there's a huge amount of people that are, but I guess I'm curious how you hear those conversations playing on a macro level, or maybe even harkening back to the WGS days, how people are thinking about this era where it's great that we have non-alcoholic drinks or people have opt out entirely, but how do you think people are thinking about that these days?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, inevitably we're influenced by the conversations we're closest to. So depending on your social circles, who they are, what age they are, what they're saying and seeing, or you go straight to the data, right, on the macro level. So it will depend on where in the country you are, but also internationally, markets are going through very different cycles of their life when it comes to what spirits are trending, if spirits are trending at all. Yes, we see that there's sort of the generalization that younger generations are drinking less alcohol or choosing other things, but we also see this trend of people drinking less but better. So in that respect, you might have some luxury brands or quality brands at certain price points that are actually thriving in these kind of market conditions. So it's very hard to make generalizations about the spirits industry. I think it comes down to the geographical market, but also the positioning of the brand and the category it's in, because those trends sort of come and go, as we've seen over the years with gin and then vodka and then tequila and then, you know, single malt and back to vodka and back to tequila and sort of what's the hot spirit. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. And again, the more we include new generations into something like Tales of the Cocktail, where yes, we have the seminars, but sometimes it's those conversations in the hotel lobby, right, or in the shared Uber on the way to the next night event, where you get the little snippets and insights that can actually inform a broader picture of what's happening out there.
Yeah, and I guess, that the point you made, I think, is not a new one to me, but a good reminder in the face of that question, which is also that for a long time, I mean, hopefully, again, in the world of drinking less but drinking better, I mean, again, these bars and restaurants, these are, businesses that are in part built on sales, and we need to ensure that hopefully they don't all go out of business with reduced, but also it could just be that, yeah, like some of us are just, again, hopefully thinking more about like, I'd rather have one or two interesting drinks than like, how many can I squeeze into this evening does feel like a much more topical conversation right now. But as a result of certainly just declining numbers, it can be easy to suddenly want to just pull the fire alarm too at that point in time.
Of course. And not to belittle it, I'm sure many people are worried and looking very closely at their sales figures. Restaurant and bar owners are always looking at their sales mix, right, of everything that they sell. And it has been interesting to see the rise of the non-alcoholic cocktail section of the menu, or that spirit-free cocktails appearing in cocktail menus across the country. It's also interesting to see the pricing strategy of those. And I know I've heard, at least anecdotally, that people that choose not to drink aren't necessarily driven to that decision by price, right? They're actually more than happy to pay sort of full cocktail price for a nice drink in a beautiful glass with a lovely garnish, and so that they feel part of that experience. In fact, they'd like to do that so they feel truly included, rather than sort of, being called out and holding something that doesn't look like they're part of the mix. So yeah, it's still sort of growing pains or learnings, evolution really, as we explore this one a bit more.
Yeah, and when I had a chance to chat with Ben Branson a while ago, and while his, comments regarding the evolution of seedlip and non-alc drinks weren't necessarily all completely novel. I think yeah, just this idea that one of his points was that sure, bartenders routinely all the time are like, oh yeah, let me like put something together for you, like just for someone ordering a cocktail, but like
Mm.
if a bar hasn't at this point thought about like what does a perhaps dignified, delicious non-alc version look like, it's like the kitchen isn't just throwing things together. They know how the burger is made, and we need to know how the delicious non-alc drinks are made. You can still, of course, employ creative mixology at that point, but you shouldn't just be shooting from the hip, because otherwise you just end up with these sugar bomb child's drinks, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the likelihood is that that audience is, like I said, more than happy to pay for that experience, because it's not about the quantity of alcohol in the glass for them. That's a perspective from others. But for that particular drinker, they're interested in the flavor and the experience, and you can still deliver that.
Um, again, you're still settling into the new role.
Mm.
So I don't know if Tails has a thought on this, but so right now, obviously, it's pretty well known you shouldn't have mixing cannabis and alcohol is a bad idea. So that'll be on a show that doesn't have many disclaimers. That's one for this show. But like, does Tails have a thought on like, I haven't know if I've seen any cannabis events yet. Because again, we have the cannabis seltzers that are beginning to come online. Is that a space that we're looking to make room for, or is that seen as like a separate industry? Does Tails have any opinion on that at this point in time that you're aware of?
Officially, the foundation doesn't have a categorical opinion on that topic. I do know that some cannabis related product partners have reached out to discuss opportunities with us. So that's something that we're looking into and could be part of the program. Again, if it aligns with our mission and if it aligns with what bartenders are seeking more information on, then it's something that we would consider. We would just have to do the due diligence of properly understanding the topic And as always, making sure that any information presented on any topic is done so with professional expertise included on any panel, so that, you know, the information given out is well thought out, professional in its nature, and can be adopted, because we have an authority in this industry we're looked up to, and with that comes the responsibility of obviously making sure what we're saying and advising people in an informal and a very formal way is accurate and helpful.
Agreed. Yeah. And I remember actually talking with a history professor of all things at one point who was talking about just, and again, a lot of people aren't there, and at least strangers to cannabis at this point, but like, especially outside of a commercial created product, it can be very difficult to dose. So if it's something you're making in a bar setting, you know, again, even in a bar setting that only features that, you want to make sure you definitely hit your marks right, because the difference between hitting 5 milligrams versus 15 milligrams or whatever can suddenly leave people really looped. And so I feel like that's one of the most interesting problems right now, is a balanced drink that's not going to just blow someone out of the water. Because in general, we know roughly what a whiskey sour has in it, versus with these things, you could very quickly run away with something there. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to lose us too much down the cannabis wormhole there.
No worries.
Um, One of the things, you know, and you and I talked about this a little bit beforehand in terms of Tales's broadest outlook at this, but I'll invoke this because hopefully this quote kind of sets the line for it. So an author that I've heard, her name's Krista Tippett. She runs a podcast called On Being. I heard her once say, "Anger is what fear and pain looks like when they show themselves in public." And you know, I mean, with that preface right there, you know, we live in these politically and socially fraught times right here. And the bar has often been seen as this egalitarian third space, the public tavern where people, the public house where people go to chat. And, you know, I guess I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on how we ensure that in our industry, you know, which is going to have a broad array of opinions, how do we ensure that all those are welcome to table? You know, there's of course certain tones and language that we can and should never abide by, but how do we ensure that left or right, conservative, Republican, you know, Democrat, how do we ensure that Tales is a welcoming space for everybody, to ensure that we can talk about things that we might on either side be overlooking?
Yeah, it's really important now more than ever. And we do say that Tales is a place where we want people to feel welcome, to feel heard, to be able to come as they are, to feel included. That's fairly easy to say. To your point, it's a big thing to follow through on, because that always fine if everybody is saying things that we want to hear and that each other want to hear. The difficult part comes when there are contrasting opinions, right? But that is at the very heart of inclusivity.
Right.
You're right. There are guardrails, parameters. We have a code of conduct around certain behavior that really is there to protect individuals that wish to contribute to Tales of the Cocktail. Certainly, anyone in any sort of leadership position that may speak on our behalf, anyone presenting a seminar, that kind of thing. So we do have that code of conduct that we've thought quite carefully about, and it's available on the Tales website, so that the industry as a whole kind of understands where we stand on moderating that kind of a space for people.
Right.
We want it to feel like a safe space for everyone. But again, that's a lot harder to actually enact than just to say. And you're right, bars and taverns throughout history, given different terminology, have always been that place where people come together and somehow are able to discuss what are really important issues, right? Because our own views, when challenged, can either open our minds or further our belief in what we're already believing. So it is an important process to be able to go through. It's incredibly sensitive, I think, especially in the US at this moment. But I think part of providing a space where people feel heard is making sure that there is space to listen, and that there
Yeah.
are avenues for people to speak up, give input, and know that if they write to us or speak out on a certain issue, we will listen to that and give it proper consideration. rather than sort of dismissing opinions that maybe don't resonate with the majority.
Right, right. I remember my friend Wade, he's an African American architect, and he talked about going to bring your dad to school day with
Oh,
his son. And in his son's class, there was a young boy who said, "Oh, I didn't know that people who look like us can be architects," right? And so I think at the heart of a lot of the DEI initiatives, which are under fire right now, uh, haven't been a part about like bringing people into the room. But I to where I also hope to, this seating could at least go is for all of the yelling to the anger is what fear and pain look like in
yeah.
public, behind the rhetoric and the terrible things we see. What about it, other than just pure evil, are people actually afraid of right now? And how do we understand for people who might be speaking out or concerned about this, what is it that might be on their mind? And again, this is tenuous. This podcast probably gonna get canceled right now. But I think that this is the thing that does interest me about, not everybody in my city who I might like believes exactly what I believe in. Why, other than just pure evilness? So yeah, so I hope Tales can find that way, because I think to be that welcoming spot in civil conversations uh, is useful in whatever way we can. So
Yeah, and I think to one of your earlier references, sometimes it's I don't know about anger, but people are confused or dismissive of things they don't understand. So, what we try to do is highlight stories of as many different types of communities and industry people as we can, so that
yeah,
maybe just sharing the stories and perspectives and backgrounds starts to broaden others' perspectives. We have heritage editorials throughout the year focusing on Black History Month, International Transgender Day of Visibility, things like that where we're sharing stories that quite honestly some people may not have heard before due to their upbringing, which is no fault of their own. But again, we're trying to be proactive by broadening the experiences that we at least share so that the community as a whole can have some exposure to other communities, in the hopes that that will start to break down some barriers and remove some of that confusion, potential anger, fear, resentment, whichever words might resonate, and bring us together just a little bit closer, or at least be ready to give benefit of the doubt rather than jump to assumptions.
right. Yeah, I always remember when my roommate in college, way back in the day, small town in Missouri, grew up with certain thoughts, and then he discovered that one of his best friends in his fraternity was gay. And that challenged all of his assumptions and really began to pull down those barriers at that point. So yeah, 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 yeah. No, I definitely love seeing that kind of that posting work from Tales right there.
Yeah, good.
Are are there, to that angle, beyond the week itself, Charlotte, that I've obviously been at least hinting around, are there the parts of what the organization does that you feel like deserve more sunshine and light than we then oftentimes get the credit that I don't say they get the credit they deserve, but are there parts of the organization you think are worth highlighting that sometimes people miss in light of the big week in New Orleans?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Like I said, Tails is a year-round initiative. It's always on. It's 365 days. We're constantly an industry partner for many conversations, some that we initiate, others that come to us. I would encourage anyone out there listening to go to the website and look at the Beyond the Bar initiatives. There's a button up top on our homepage that takes you straight to what that program is all about. And we share the sort of seminars and blog posts and resources that are curated throughout the year in that one central spot. So I think people there can see the ongoing conversations we have, the supporting of work of other industry leaders is all there. There are many different initiatives that we kind of take part in throughout the year, every year. And again, depending on what the industry needs, highlighting or supporting, challenges overcome,
Yeah.
each year it's slightly different. But yeah, ultimately, our mission is to support, educate, and advance the communities of this industry on a global level. So we're constantly seeking out those opportunities to support, and often they come knocking on our door, to do that because again, we have that respect of the industry that we're a credible partner to do so.
Okay. Oh, we've certainly covered a lot, and thanks for going down some fun little wormholes with me. Is there anything we haven't covered today, Charlotte, that you had hoped or want to talk about with regards to the organization, the hopes you have for the role, or is there anything we haven't talked about today that would be
I
helpful?
think one of the reasons that people fall in love with Tales of the Cocktail is the city of New Orleans itself. Um, Tales couldn't operate in the way that it does, I think, anywhere else in the world. And we've had previous Tales on Tour events, and there'll be some of those coming back in the near future. But when it comes to sort of, I know often people say, well, I have to choose from, these three events, which one to attend in a year if I can only travel one time. I don't think there's anywhere that combines the offerings that we do through the educational seminars, the tasting experiences, the networking opportunities. It's the true global event of our industry, with all of the big names and veterans. 50% of the crowd is new for the first time. It's the most wonderful exchange of minds and passion in the industry. And everything is on the beautiful, iconic backdrop of New Orleans, which, I mean, food, music, culture, color, vibrancy, there's just literally nowhere else on earth like it. And I think that beautiful mix of those three things makes Tales truly iconic. And that's the part that I'm excited to enjoy more on a personal level, but also make sure is understood, and just incorporating those wonderful aspects of New Orleans as much as possible in the week's programming, I think keep things exciting for everyone that comes.
You are right, and I'm smiling right now because you're right. It is an incredible backdrop, and it's all shooting. Whether it's again, can get a little gross when it rains sometimes, but the way like that deep New Orleans muggy air on kind of right after it's rained, walking the streets is lovely. Do you have any, again, after almost 20 years, a lot of memories and whatnot, but are there a couple of boxes or places you feel like you need to check every year, or what are a few of your to-dos if you have your time every year when you're down there?
Yeah, and that's one thing I look forward to expanding my understanding of New Orleans a bit more, right? Because my time has been graciously confined to sort of the French Quarter, which is not a bad place to get to know, but also just a tremendously busy week. But yeah, get into some of the traditional kind of historical places, like get into Napoleon House for a Pim's Cup during the week of Tales if you can. Get into some of these places where it all began for us, right? I mean, Tales of the Cocktail began in New Orleans at the time where we weren't quite sure where the cocktail still originated from. There was a good chance it might have been New Orleans. So there's so much history there. And I think, again, for younger bartenders or the new generation coming in, it's really important to take the opportunity to visit those historical sites around New Orleans. On a personal level, I also have a hot yoga studio called Magnolia. It's a Black-owned studio in the French Quarter, and that keeps me straight. Every morning I do that of Tales, and that sees me through the day.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, I definitely have after year one, I graded my rest and relaxation or recovery, whatever
Yeah.
step, because okay, well that's great to hear, Magnolia.
Mhm.
Okay. Fun. Well, this has been great. And yeah, no, it kind of definitely gets not that it usually takes much, but kind of even just you talking about the backdrop of New Orleans, kind of like, all right,
Mm,
this whets my appetite in the right way for
good.
things. Um, and Charlotte, we'll link out to the Tales of the Cocktail website and social media.
Great.
TOTCF. I don't know if that's just it or not, but Tales of the Cocktail, we will put the link in the show notes and all that good stuff right there. Um,
Fantastic.
but thanks for taking the time to chat today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Chris.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you'd write us a review on whatever platform you listen on, or share an episode with a friend. The show notes are available at decodingcocktails.com/podcast. Happy cocktailing, everybody.